The views and opinions expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated. Reproduction or dissemination other than for the purpose of education or information without the express written permission of the Phoenix Research Institute or Nova Society Media is strictly prohibited. A quick program note, the Nova Society will be off on the 24th and 25th of December in celebration of Christmas, and next episode will return on Thursday, December 26th.
Welcome back to the Nova Society. I'm your host, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and I'm here with the panel, Dr. Scott Gershwer and Dr. Mark Bount. And today our panel will be once again answering listener emails. Our question today comes from James, who lives in Butte, Montana. James asks, President-elect Trump has issued a warning to Liz Cheney. Is this just the start of retribution against enemies of Trumpism? And I would maybe add to that question, is this just the start of retribution against Trump's perceived enemies of himself?
Well, he said he was going to do this, and he's doing it. So, yep, I think it's the beginning.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, this, as we've said, and many people have said, if he says it, he probably means to try to do it. Whether he'll be able to accomplish it or not is, that's up in the air. But yeah, I think that this is absolutely. And here's the funny thing that gets me is Liz Cheney. Now, I never agreed with her father, Dick Cheney, and I never agreed with her politics either. But they're kind of like the Kennedys of the Republicans. I mean, or the Bushes they're a dynasty. They are a Republican political powerhouse dynasty. And to take them and say we're against them, that tells me that, well, the Republican Party isn't what it used to be, and that's unfortunate. But yeah, I can see, and it's going not only with them. This is the beginning. This is absolutely the beginning of it. I mean, it's going against news agencies, and that's it's going to be a trend, and I think it's going to be something we're going to see quite a bit going forward in this Trump presidency, where he's going to go after those people that were against him.
And, the really galling thing I think about this thing with Liz Cheney is that the guy who chaired that committee, who's recommending that she be arrested for this and put on trial for this, is the Representative Loudermilk. I think it's Barry, I forget, who was one of the guys who was helping the January 6th invaders get around the Capitol, right? And when he was asked about it, and he said, no, I didn't do that. And they said, well, we actually have cameras in the Capitol, and we have you showing a group of people the back stairways and how to get around the different parts of the Capitol. And he's like, oh, well, those are some people from my district. And they were like, well, why are you showing them how to use like the back entry to get upstairs to where the offices are and stuff like that? And what universe is that part of a tour of the Capitol? I've been to the Capitol. You go see the where all the statues are and stuff like that. You don't go up in the offices. And so this is the guy who, at first he denied it, and then they had pictures, and he said, yeah, it was nothing big. This guy was a conspirator. And I believe he's one of the people who asked for a pardon. It's galling that he's going about, this sort of preemptive strike, I guess you might say, against Liz Cheney and I imagine Kinzinger will be next, and they're finding ways to arrest these people. And the real fear, I don't think, is necessarily that this is going to hold up in court or anything like that, but it's a form of harassment similar to McCarthyism, where you're going to destroy people's lives. You're going to drain their bank accounts because they've got to fight this somehow. And that means lawyering up, and it's very expensive. So there are opportunity costs as well as defending yourself costs. And it's sleazy and it's underhanded and it's totally Trump.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, this is, again, people, this is what you voted for, and this is what you're going to get. And remember, when he's done with the Liz Cheneys and the Kinsingers and all of those people, when he's done with all of them, it doesn't stop there. They turn their attention to the next group, and that next group might be you. It's a common historical fact that dictators and autocrats have a tendency not to just stop with who they've got their core group that they're going to go after, but they never stop. It never stops there. Stalin was like that, and again, in no way would I compare Donald Trump with Joseph Stalin or with Adolf Hitler. I think one of us made the comparison. He's more Mussolini. He's not very bright. He's charismatic, but he's more Mussolini. He doesn't rise to the level of, say, a Stalin or a Hitler, and that's not in a good way. So please do not write me and say, "Gee, you were saying Hitler was great" or anything, because I'm not. What I'm saying is that there was a plan there. He surrounded himself with people that were gonna enact that plan. The plan was absolutely horrific, and I don't think Trump has that much stomach for something like that. But I think that this, depending on who is going after these people, this could get out of hand very quickly. This could very easily get out of hand. And like I say, be careful what you're asking for, because once they've taken all the bad people out, they eventually start coming looking for somebody else, and that might very well be you.
Yeah, and look at all the CEOs who are going to Mar-a-Lago and trying to make nice with Trump, and the media people who have done that, including the Morning Joe crew or couple. And these are unforgivable because they're basically begging for forgiveness from somebody who's not going to forgive them. He may take a little bit longer to get around to them, but the whole idea here, especially of bringing to court the pollster from Iowa, or bringing to court ABC News successfully, as it turns out. The whole idea there is to continue to harass these people so that they no longer criticize him. And when you talk about how far it's going to get, boy, you got to start thinking about the weather people and, anybody who is willing to stand up to him and say, oh, no, the United States didn't actually fight the British Army on the airfields, and that kind of thing. Any stupid thing he says is either going to be accepted. And once you accept it, he owns you, right? Once he's got you nodding, he owns you. And you can't prevent any of the really horrible stuff that he probably wants to do. So I think I think this is a huge problem. And yes, it's the very first step, and it's not going to end well either.
No.
And as Mark said, this is going to continue.
It's a snowball.
It's Bob Woodward. It was basically, once ABC capitulated, it was who's next, and who's next is CBS and Bob Woodward and that poor pollster with the Des Moines Register, including any influencer or independent media, I believe, as well as podcast person with apparently a large following. And of course, they don't specify what large is. And I'm not even sure what an influencer is, to be honest.
Well, Brooke, I'll give you an example of an influencer.
Sure.
Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon is an influencer. He ripped off Republicans. He didn't rip off Democrats who bought into his scam about building the wall and sent him money, and he just took that money. But somehow or another, he's still a hero to Trumpists and people on the right. Steve Bannon came out against Mike Johnson today and said that Mike Johnson is basically just a Democrat, that he holds up the Bible and he wraps up talks about the social issues like a Republican, but he's basically just a Democrat. And I mean, if Congress doesn't go along with this CR, let's say, and there are people who are on the far right who are saying that they're not going along with it. And you start dividing up the Republicans in Congress again, that there are going to be people who just, find themselves joining one faction or another. And if they speak out, they're in danger. I mean,
Yeah.
was it Joni Ernst, who said something about Pete Hegseth, right? And she was like basically assaulted for this, threatened all kinds of ways, and now has like backtracked to not to the point where she says, I'm going to support Pete Hegseth, but he's going to get a hearing.
Yeah.
She's
And
not going to
Lisa
stop that from him.
Yeah, and Lisa Murkowski is aware that she's going to get primaried unless she obeys. And I was thinking, Mark, you were saying that President-elect Trump is not like Hitler. One thing that Hitler did do was, I don't know if he encouraged, but he certainly did not discourage chaos and infighting among his own people, because that helped to ensure that no single person was going to rise to threaten him. And I notice that among Trump's people, there's a lot of infighting and a lot of chaos. And Trump seems to enjoy that as well. I don't know if Mussolini did that or not. I don't know enough about Mussolini, but nor do I know enough about Stalin to know if Stalin encouraged that or not. But I do know enough about Hitler to know that that was something that he actively promoted. And Trump doesn't seem to discourage that. So, and I've seen, as Scott was just saying, there are becoming factions of individuals who was it a senator or it was a congressman from California who was saying that you can't just accept the tariffs, or you can't just do whatever the president-elect wants. There has to be some kind of balance or something. I can't remember. He stood up and he spoke. I don't remember the man's name. And he, of course, that's a very minority opinion. And I'm not sure who spoke out against him, but I'm sure that someone has. This was a few days ago, and I wish I could remember the man's name. But there is a lot of infighting, and I believe it was Marjorie Taylor Greene who's now complaining that Canada is collaborating with Mexico in helping to ensure illegal immigration, because Mexicans can get an online visa to fly from Mexico to Canada, and then they can come in through the northern border. So we ought to, once we're finished, the United States, once we're finished bombing the Mexican cartels, we ought to bomb Montreal as an example.
Wait, somebody actually said that? Somebody said
Marjorie
that?
Taylor Greene actually said that, yes. As far as I understand, yeah. I know.
Oh, and Montreal's a beautiful city. Oh,
I know.
That'd be a shame.
Yeah. And of course, the whole situation is simply chaotic. Oh, and one thing that President-elect Trump was complaining about was that President Biden is not addressing, I don't know if it's a war in like the Israeli Gaza, Middle East, and the war in Ukraine. There were various issues that were escalating that are not being taken care of, and things are being done like shooting missiles from Ukraine into Russia that President-elect Trump, should be being consulted about as the incoming administration, and he has not been consulted about it. And he should have been consulted about it before action was taken, and that didn't happen, and it should have happened, and that's not any good. And various issues on the world stage should have been or should be being taken care of now, so that he doesn't have to address them when he comes into office. And I just thought that was very interesting, that everything should be cleaned up in a neat and tidy package for him, so that when he comes in, there's a clean slate and everything is addressed and taken care of like it's the new term of a school year, and you're coming in after summer vacation, and you're starting with a review or whatever it might be of and everything is just all nice and smooth and neat, and you're starting off all fresh with a clean calendar.
Well, all I can say to that is he hasn't been consulted, because why would we consult the galactically stupid? He's going to do what he's going to do. And again, he's going to try to, anything that's wrong, he's going to try to pass it back on to somebody else. It's not his fault. And get used to it. It's 4 years. You're going to have 4 years of this. And you're right. I think the Republican Party is fractured. I don't think we're actually a two-party system anymore, because the Republicans are really fractured quite a bit. And the ones that seem to be in good graces with the incoming administration are the ones that are really trying to see who can be the biggest dumbass of the group. And that's just kind of the way it is.
So, and it's very possible, I'm going to say that it's likely to happen, that the government gets shut down because they're not going to pass this CR, and the factions that are in the Republican Party are too far apart on fiscal spending and what fiscal responsibility means. And I mean, when you hear Chip Roy, as I did yesterday, talking about that they're not planning on raising taxes on wealthy people, which would be the solution to a lot of the ills that we have, that they're not being serious. And all they can think about is cutting things for ordinary Americans. I love when they say everyday Americans rather than ordinary Americans. This is one of my little quirks there, pet peeves, that, they can't bring themselves to say ordinary, so they say everyday. I mean, I think we're all everyday Americans, but just ordinary people who are not super wealthy or anything have to pay, because the wealthy people need a bigger pay cut, a bigger tax cut. And it's just where that party is going is unhinged, more unhinged, and the infighting and how they all managed to suck up to Trump while doing all these crazy, all this crazy infighting is just going to lead to absolutely nothing getting done. And the American people are going to suffer, and the American people really should finally learn their lesson, get off their asses and vote for Democrats, because there is nothing in this party anymore.
Yeah, so I do hope that we've answered your question, James, and thank you again, everyone, for listening, and we will see you again next time on the Nova Society.
So that's all the time we have for today's episode. The Nova Society is a production of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our sponsors for this episode. BH Conflict Resolution Services, a full-service dispute resolution firm offering expert and cost-effective mediation services to couples, groups, and businesses. BHCRS can be reached at www.bhcrs.com. We'd also like to thank our podcast partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, and Podkite, who does all of our analytics. iHeartRadio, where people get their music and podcasts, Apple iTunes, the largest source for music and podcasts on the internet, Spotify, the most popular source for the Nova Society. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms. We'd like to thank all of our listeners. Without you, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a comment, question, or would like to be a guest on the Nova Society, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. Always remember, the power of society is knowledge. So for Dr. Scott Gershwer, Dr. Priscilla Hobbs, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and all of us here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Be well, and we hope to see you again next time.